Hey friends, it's Christopher Holder with Christ Bearer Ministries, and I'm back, sort of. Not really for long. This video is not part of my new, promised regular content release or anything like that, the revamp of the ministry. My video today is one that I just decided I should go ahead and release because I feel that it's timely. But as you can see, I am in my new office. Got a little bit of work to do. You can kind of see behind me. Feel free to make a comment and let me know what you think so far. Got to get some curtains, want to get some better lighting, things like that. But yeah, this is kind of the thing. So that's where we're at today. It'll be a few weeks before I get going again on really focusing in and on new content and things like that. But like I said, the message today, or the thoughts that I want to share with you today, I feel are super, super timely. Because if you live in the US, even if you live under a rock, you have to know that there is a presidential election right around the corner. And it's a little bit crazy right now in the US. People are crazy all over the world. But I wanted to share some things about politics, and as the title of the video said, preaching politics in particular. So let's just kind of dive right in because I don't want this video to run too terribly long. What do I mean when I say preaching politics? So in churches, not just in the US, but around the world, there are a number of churches where on Sunday mornings or whenever that regular scheduled service is within that church, that the preacher, the pastor, whatever you want to call them, from the stage or the pulpit will talk about political issues, maybe even more often than Jesus issues or God issues. They'll preach politics rather than preach Jesus. And I've been in some conversations about this, and people have different opinions about it. Some people love it. I mean, some of these churches where that's a frequent thing are very successful. They have a lot of people that come. I've met the pastor of one such church, have never attended, but he seemed like a great guy and very sincere in what he was attempting to do and help his people. Okay. Some people don't like it though. Some people are super turned off by it and will even walk into a church, and if they hear the preacher starting to talk about things that sound political, they'll get up and leave in the middle of the sermon. So I wanted to share some thoughts about that. And to be clear, what I'm talking about when I talk about preaching politics is very specific. It is that regular service, usually on a Sunday morning. Some churches have several services, but they usually preach the same message. They may have different services at different times for different people with different styles of music and things like that, but the message is usually consistent in all of those weekly services. Some churches do that on Saturday night, most have Sunday morning. And so I'm talking about that, and I'm talking about specifically when the pastor or leader of the church gets up and from that stage talks about politics. And that's what I mean when I say preaching politics. Now, I've got a few opinions about it, and I'm going to share those with you. And as I do, I don't expect you to always agree with everything I say, but I do have some thoughts that I think might help you decide if you walk into a church where maybe you think that's going on and maybe you like it, maybe you don't. It'll help you kind of figure out, I think, and navigate, where you want to be. If you want to stay there, if you want to go somewhere else, look around, whatever. Because like I said, some people really like it. In fact, I've got a friend of mine, and he goes to one of these churches where politics are preached quite frequently. And he'll go to that service first thing in the morning, but then he'll turn around and literally drive to the other side of town in the location where he lives to a church that preaches Jesus. And so he'll go to two church services every Sunday. He'll get some politics in one and he'll get some Jesus in the other, and that's his thing, and he likes that. So not judging anybody if that's what your deal is, or if you absolutely can't stand it or whatever. Again, just going to share some thoughts, my opinion on some things, and refer to some scripture that I think will help you make your own decision. So my opinion on this is that a pastor's job is to speak, teach, preach about God issues and not political issues. part of that is that I've never seen a job description for a pastor that included political commentary. I've just never seen it. It could exist. Some churches that may be what they're all about, and I'm not judging that at all, but I've never seen that. And I believe that, Scripture supports what a pastor or a church leader is really supposed to do in terms of sharing the good news, sharing the gospel. So that's what I think in terms of whether or not someone should be doing that. And it's kind of like, several years ago, actually not that long ago, there was a big move in professional sports. And what was happening was, and I don't think they're doing this as much anymore, I think it kind of died down. But, the professional athletes were basically, protesting and sharing their political views when they were on the clock. And the way I look at that is, that athlete, when they walk into the stadium, when they walk onto the field for the game, when they walk onto the practice field, in the locker room, the interviews before and after the games, the award shows where they may get the Heisman Trophy and these different things. All of that time is them being on the clock, and it's the people who buy the jerseys, who buy the tickets and the subscriptions to the TV channels to get all the games and things like that. Those are the people that are really ultimately paying their salaries, and so their job description does not include political commentary. Same thing with actors and musicians, although it's a little bit more challenging to navigate there because an actor could participate and act in a political movie, and that's fine. But for them, a lot of times, I quit watching all the award shows. I would tune in to see who won Best Picture, and then I'd get somebody telling me about their political views, and I honestly don't care. That's not your job. That's not why I like you. I like you because you're a good actor, because you made me feel some cool emotions that I was seeking when I walked in the movie theater. Musicians is even tougher to navigate because let's just face it, some of the best music of the 60s and 70s was entirely political. And so people can navigate that effectively, but going back to the example of the professional athlete, if they wanted to stand on a platform at a political rally, if they wanted to create their own platform and do their own thing, if they wanted to create their own YouTube channel, whatever, those things are off the clock and they're absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And I believe the same thing is true for a pastor. If a pastor wants to be involved, and the one that I referenced earlier is involved, he's in some other very political organizations where they try to educate and share things with people that they think are valuable in the political spectrum, right? And so, but that's their own time. And what a person wants to do when they're off the clock is fine. It's just like, for me, if I work a job that we would consider secular, for an organization that is not outwardly Christian, doesn't promote their faith in like their mission statements or whatever, when I'm on the clock, I'm getting paid to do whatever, X, right? I'm not getting paid to preach, not getting paid to share my faith, unless, of course, I work for a ministry. And so if somebody wants to know about my faith, if somebody wants to have those conversations, well, we can have a coffee break, we can talk about it over lunch, maybe get together for dinner after work. But while we're working, we're getting paid to do something very specific. And again, that's just kind of where I sit when it comes to pastors as well. Now, I want to be really, really clear about this, though, because there's a few things to consider when we're talking about this. And so I've got like 3 things that I really want you to think about when we talk about whether or not a pastor is preaching politics. So the church's primary responsibility is to care for the community's spiritual health. But that's not all a church should be doing. Most churches are caring for other aspects of the people that they serve. They may have like a food bank or a homeless shelter that they support or heavily involved in, or anything, throughout the course of the week, not part of that Sunday service. They might have classes on anything from, it could be Bible studies, it could be, men's and women's groups, but they could have cooking classes theoretically, things like that to further educate the community and to pour into their lives. And so one of the things to consider is that, that midweek service, I mean, some churches might have their regular service midweek, but a lot of churches have something going on a Wednesday night, for example. And during that time, having guest speakers, and if the church feels led to educate or encourage people in this realm, I really don't have a problem with that. It's just an additional service to the congregation or to the community. One example that happened several years ago that I caught was there's a really large church in Houston, and they were on a kick of preaching about health, and they were focused on the physical health. So, the diet, the exercise, being physically healthy, being well, and all that good stuff. And so they were preaching on that, and that's biblical as far as I'm concerned. I think it's pretty clear in the Bible that God wants us well. He cares about our physical bodies as well as our spiritual ones. And so they were on that kick. They were preaching about that. And during the week, in their midweek gatherings, times together or whatever, they had guest speakers coming in and sharing about the health benefits of exercise and different diets and stuff. And I just remember this young lady that I know. She's a vegan, and she's very passionate about the health benefits of her vegan lifestyle. And they invited her to come speak in a midweek service. And there was this massive meltdown. And it was on both sides of the situation. The church, a lot of Christians, a lot of people from the church, had an issue with the fact that she's not Christian. Well, she wasn't preaching about Jesus. She wasn't preaching about any God. She was talking about raw fruits and vegetables and why they're good for you. So that was kind of just a mess. And then on the other side of things, her followers, because she has YouTube channel and does a lot of things in the community, or used to anyway, but they were freaking out and saying that they were going to quit following her and stuff because she did this. And honestly, I think it was less about the fact that she shared this in a church as to what church it was. A lot of people, either love or really dislike the particular pastor of this church, but it was just this big meltdown. And it's like, this is a service to the community. The church was trying to help people. She was trying to help people. Where's the problem? And so when it comes to that midweek thing, having those guest speakers, if they want to go political on that, I've got no problem with that, because it is just an additional service to the community. Secondly, again, as I said earlier, when a person is off the clock, they can, and quite frankly, I believe they should be involved in how their country, how their local community, their state, federal governments are being run. I mean, if you live in a country, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but if you live in a country where you have the right to vote, where you have the ability to get involved with these things, you absolutely should. It's important. And your faith beliefs are going to connect to your political beliefs. And so for any pastor or staff member of a church, being involved in those things outside of the Sunday service, off the clock, again, I think it's relevant, I think it's important, and absolutely acceptable. The last point, the third point that I want to make on this, and I think this is really the most important point, is that there are God issues that are not political issues, but that have been politicized. Now, let me say that again. There are a number of God issues that are important to the heart of God, that aren't political, but have been politicized. And if you know me, and if you've seen any of my videos, you probably know at least one that I'm going to bring up, and that's the issue of abortion. The Bible is very, very clear about life and death and blessings and curses and health and all of these things that touch this particular issue. The love of children. All of these things are super, super important to the heart of God. And so that particular subject isn't political. It's a God issue. And so, when a pastor's talking about that in a Sunday morning message, that's not preaching politics. it could become that. It could evolve into that if the person goes into perhaps talking about political parties or individual candidates or something like that. But the issue itself is a God issue that has been politicized. And I remember, in fact, many years ago, a conversation that I was having with a friend of mine because there was a particular political party, and I agreed with a lot of things on that side of the political spectrum and the way they thought or claimed to think or did things or whatever. But I was really kind of hung up on this one particular issue, and I was like, man, even though I agree with these guys on a lot of things, I don't know that I can continue voting for them because of their stance on abortion. And my friend, he said to me, he said, well, look at the other side. The ones that you don't agree with on as many topics, but you agree with on this one particular issue. What have they done in line with your beliefs other than talk over the years and manipulate voters? And I thought about it, and I did a little bit of digging, and he was right. They, at that point anyway, they really hadn't done much other than talk, right? So now that's changed over the years. More and more of the people in agreement on that side of things within that political party have done things in favor of the lives of unborn children. But at the time, he made a really good point. And so, when they politicize things, politicians, political parties, when they start politicizing things that are God issues, a lot of that is really about pandering to the voter. And so you've just got to be wise in that, and you've got to really think about what is that political issue versus what is that God issue. So ask yourself that question. And all of the things that you hear politicians talking about, all the topics that they, really, stand on as far as their platform, which of those really matter to the heart of God? Taxes? Now that seems like a stretch. But if you think about it, Jesus talked about taxes. Actually, he talked about money quite a bit, but specifically, he said to give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to give to God what is God's. Now, basically, that's saying pay your taxes and pay your tithe or giving, right? Could you say that taxes are a God issue? Honestly, I don't know how you would preach on that unless you were preaching about good stewardship and make sure you pay your taxes is important. Make sure you budget for that, something like that, because good stewardship with the gifts from God, your financial gifts that He gives you, that's important. That's a God issue. I don't really know for sure. I'm just kind of throwing that out at you just to kind of think about all of these things. How about foreign relations, foreign policy, I think is what they call it. What about that? Is that a political issue or is that a God issue? Again, Jesus, he went into Samaria. He ministered to Romans. He crossed over into this area of other nations, if you will, and he loved them. He shared who he was with or is with them, and ministered to them. So I don't know, maybe. The point that I'm trying to make is that when you're thinking about this, before you even get into politics, again, we're still talking about the Sunday message, the church message coming from the pastor. I would really recommend giving that pastor the benefit of the doubt. If you walk in and it sounds like they're talking about something political, give them a chance. And even if you wind up disagreeing with everything they say, chances are you're going to find some sort of nugget or some sort of learning that you can walk away with. It shouldn't be a complete waste of your time, whether you agree or not. And then you can kind of decide, was that really focused on God and the heart of God, or was it really on that side of preaching politics? So in summary on that topic, I think it's just one of those things where you kind of have to decide for yourself. If you like it, great. If you don't, there's churches for everybody, right? I think that in general, that's not the job of the pastor to preach politics. But I also think that you've got to really listen. You've got to really approach this with an open heart and an open mind, because bottom line is they're just trying to help. And I think if they stay away from naming, particular candidates, or they stay away from naming, political parties, those kinds of things kind of give you the indication that, yeah, they might be trying to guide you a certain direction, but when it comes to politics, I mean, that's on you. You've got to do your own study and things like that. But don't shut somebody down just because they start talking about something that has been politicized. That's all over the media between candidates back and forth and things like that. Because when you start to think about it, if it's something that you recognize that's biblical, if it's something you recognize that's the heart of God, that's going to really influence your direction if you value what God values. And so don't shut them down, give them a chance, and then, at the end of the day, decide for yourself, just like with politics, which is the segue into what else I want to share with you today. The next thing that I want to kind of talk about is really just a very, very high level overview, I think, of U.S. politics, just kind of how things work. And some of this isn't just U.S., some of this is global. This is kind of what I vaguely remember from high school, government class. And I want to talk about it just a little bit because there might be some confusion. I mean, I was raised to believe that a particular political party believed and did X. And then as I got older, I started questioning and thinking for myself and realized that wasn't completely accurate. A friend of mine that is a pastor came to the U.S. from the U.K. and shared that when he got here and started settling in, he realized that he actually had things backward in what he understood things to be in the political realm. And so this isn't, pro anybody or anti anybody. This is really meant to just try to give you some clarification on a few things in case you're not familiar, or, just maybe never heard it. Might help young voters, may help some of you that care about U.S. politics, even if you're not in the U.S., things like that. And then I'm going to wrap up by, I'm going to tell you how to vote. Yeah, I said that. After just saying that I'm not in favor of preaching politics. Don't tune me out. Trust me, go along for the ride. It's going to be okay. So again, this is super high level, and I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit here because I'll just be honest. In high school, I really didn't pay a lot of attention, but I remember some things, and I think this is pretty accurate, and it will help you understand kind of the starting point of American politics. Again, super, super shallow, so don't beat me up. And if I get something wrong, pop a note in the comments and correct me, because I'm going by memory here, and I'm old, and memory, yeah. Anyway, all right, so in the U.S., there are a lot of political parties, tons of them, but there's two main ones. There's the Democrat Party, there's the Republican Party. And the other parties, this is just my observation, the other parties that are they're really small, they don't have seemingly a lot of chance of producing candidates that get elected unless it may be in local elections, but definitely not at the federal level. Oftentimes, if they have a candidate that they feel has a good chance of winning, that candidate will run as a member of one of those other two parties. Because that's just kind of, everybody knows those two parties. They don't necessarily know what they stand for, but everybody knows those two parties. And I think a lot of times what happens is with these smaller parties, it's one of those things where, this party, yeah, they line up mostly with one of the two major parties, but, they have one real sticking point that they feel that they distinguishes them, or some people feel really passionate about a particular issue, and so they spin up a party really to just draw attention to that issue in hopes that one of those two parties will kind of absorb and go more their direction, or have more focus on that. And I think that's the really the main thing with those smaller parties. You may have heard, or you may have watched a show, sitcom called Parks and Rec, and with Ron Swanson, and he was part of one of those smaller parties. It's actually probably the third largest party that we have in the U.S. But again, even with those guys, they don't typically their candidates, if they have somebody that they really feel has a good shot at getting elected, their candidates will usually run as Republicans. So I think they line up more with the Republicans, but they've got definitely some of their own things that set them apart. And so you'll see that pretty commonly. But Democrats, Republicans, those are the two main ones. Now, the Democrat Party is considered the more liberal party, while the Republican Party is considered the more conservative party. I say that understanding that in the US, liberal and conservative don't necessarily mean the same things they mean in other countries. I've actually heard the Republican Party referred to as the liberal party, and the person I was talking to, their definition was very different. They had some misunderstandings, but that's just generally how things are looked at. So in terms of the just very, very high level basic overview, this is what we were taught in high school, government and economics. If you draw a line, and on the left side is where the Democrat Party will sit, and on the right side is where the Republican Party will sit. Now, who decided left and right? I don't know. But if that line has, right in the middle, you draw a line, cross section right there, that's moderate. That's completely moderate, completely neutral, okay? And the further you go to the left, the larger the government, the more services the government provides, the more control the government has. So way out off the screen onto the left is things like, your communism, right? It's way out here. Or whatever is more controlling the communism. I think it's like totalitarianism or something like that, right? And so typically going to be a larger government, more control over the people, more services, like they'll have all the healthcare will be controlled by the government, maybe the media will be controlled by the government. Again, that's when you start getting way out there. Then on the right side, again, try to get it off the screen there, at the very far right is no government. There's nobody in charge, nobody in control, nobody, providing services, which we call anarchy. And throughout history, you've seen, big swings to either side, of the pendulum there, where, anarchy can't sustain itself for very long because people won't allow it to. So, maybe during a big turnover, a war or whatever, there's the chaos, there's the nobody in control, nobody in charge, but then eventually somebody steps up. And then a lot of times it swings completely to the other side, where whoever that is that steps up gets control of the military or whatever in that particular situation, becomes in complete power, complete control, and a dictator or whatever. Now, when you're looking at the Democrat and Republican parties, Republicans tend to be on the right side of that line, less government, less control, less services, let the people kind of rule and manage themselves to a degree. And then on the left side, more of that, larger government, more control, more services, okay? And so what we were basically kind of taught in school was that, people in general are looking towards the center for their candidates. They want, moderates. So there's a lot of other differences between these two parties and what they stand for, and then also within individuals within the parties, right? So you may have some that are on the Democrat side, some that are further over and some that are further this way, kind of thing. But people generally like those folks that aren't, extreme in any direction, and they want, they want to see them work together, overcome their differences, and continue to bless and benefit the people of the U.S. And so that's kind of the very, again, super shallow, so don't beat me up because I know there's a lot of other differences between those two parties, but I just wanted to kind of give you that general idea. And so then when you're looking at the individual candidates or the individual parties, you start digging in, and that's when you start to see there's a lot more, but that's just kind of where they land at that high level. And then from what I've seen is in my life, just generally, when, I mean, because again, people, it's a fallen world, and we're messed up, right? That's why we need Jesus. So you'll get, you got that center line, and then you'll get the parties or the individuals or whatever, and they'll just kind of keep drifting further and further out, more and more extreme on things. And so what it looks like, what it seems to happen is, say we wind up, way over here on this left side, and people get fed up with it. They're like, you're getting too extreme, because the far ends, the far extremes of both are unhealthy. They're not good for people. People, get oppressed, or they die, or whatever. They're just, those extremes are just bad. And so we start drifting too far out one side or the other, and then people kind of get fed up, and so then they'll tend to do a big swing back to the opposite side, about the same distance out from center. And the idea is, when that happens, this person's only going to be around for a period of time, and we'll start kind of, people will get the message. They just got the message. We went the opposite direction, and so now you need to start coming back to the center, or vice versa, whichever way you want to swing it. And so that's what the voters historically seem to do in this country, is to try to keep that balance as people start and parties start drifting further and further out from that middle line. And so that's just, like I said, that's just super, super high level. I hope that helps. Bottom line is, just like I tell you, everything that I share from the Bible is, don't take my word for it, dig in and find out for yourself. And that's the segue into this last section that I think is really important today, that I want to share with you. I want to tell you how to vote, because I believe firmly that if you live in a country where you have the right to vote, it's not just a right, and it's not just a privilege, it is a responsibility. I know people who, would give, their right arm for the ability to speak into their government, for the ability to participate in a fair election. Some countries, the elections are a joke. They just do it for show. But it's super, super important if you have that, if you were blessed to live in a nation where you can participate in your government, that you get involved. And in the U.S., we have, the big elections every 4 years, because that includes the presidency. We have elections every 2 years, and for different levels, and we can vote in our local city government elections. We've got county government elections. We've got state government elections. And then, of course, we've got the federal government elections. And it's super important to be involved in these things, because, I used to say, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain. You lose that right. But, I've got to say, as I get older, I think it's more than that. I think it's more than just voting. Because, I was raised understanding that I'm not the smartest person in the country, and I don't study economics. That's not an area of focus for me. I like history now that I'm older. Didn't when I was a kid, but I don't have a degree in history. I don't have a degree in law. I don't have I haven't studied all the ins and outs of the Constitution and the opinions of people and all of these things. And so I was taught, okay, you got some candidates, and basically the way it works in the U.S., I'm talking about the presidency specifically, is that, or the way it's supposed to work. Actually, this election, things got kind of changed. But the Republicans, or people who identify as Republicans, or say they're going to vote Republicans, like I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I consider myself an independent. But people who tend to vote Republican, they get together and they have candidates that basically, for a little while, act like they completely hate each other and don't have, are completely different and don't stand for the same things. And so they debate, and then they vote, and they pick a candidate over there. And the Democrats typically do the exact same thing. And it's like, oh, okay. Now, once they've picked their candidate to represent for the presidency, then for the most part, they're all friends again. And then they just hate the other team. Whatever. It's politics. And now this election is different because the lady that's running for the president for the Democrat Party did not go through that process. It was a very unique situation in this country this time. So she did not get elected to run for president the way it's been done traditionally. Uh, but I won't get into that. It was a unique situation. Okay. So you get these people together and you get your two candidates, and the way I was taught is, and even in the what they call the primaries, where the people on the same team are fighting each other to get to be able to fight the other team. You listen to them, you watch the debates, and they'll tell you what they believe. Because just because somebody's a Democrat or Republican doesn't mean that they line up, you know, perfectly with the general platforms of the parties. You know, they may have some things that are more extreme over there, or some things that are more moderate over there. Some things, they may have some beliefs that typically line up with the other party even. And so you listen to these individuals, you get a feel for them. They tell you what they're going to do, and you trust them because they know more than you. But that doesn't work. It's not reality, because let's just face it, politicians lie. They lie, they exaggerate, they twist the truth. That's what they do. And not to be mean, but most of them are lawyers. I'm just going to throw that out there and let it go. You just, take it for what it's worth. But most of them are lawyers. I'm stressing that. Most of them are lawyers, okay? Do what you want with that. But it's just, I find that a lot of them they'll even say things that they can't do in hopes that the other areas of government will go towards their party, and those individuals will agree with them and support them, and so that they can make it happen, which doesn't always happen. I mean, you can get a Democrat president and a Democrat this and a Democrat that, and they might all disagree and not support each other. Who knows? Until they get in there, right? So when it comes to voting, if you have a degree in economics and foreign policy and law and history, and if you got PhDs in, like, I don't know, everything, then you could probably go and vote with 100% confidence that your candidate is the best candidate based on what's important to you. But chances are you don't have all those degrees. So how do you vote? And so this is what I just want to try to help you guys with, because I think this is really the foundation of it. You have to engage. You have to be involved if you're in a country where that's allowed. Otherwise, I would say, move to a different country where that's not allowed, and allow other people to come in that care, that have lived under things that were difficult, and let them come to your country where they can be a part of the process and be a part of the solution. Because if you're not engaged, I think you're part of the problem. And it's not to say just vote for voting's sake. I mean, honestly, my first vote was for a candidate, and I was an idiot in terms of my motivation. I'm not saying that it was, in hindsight, necessarily a bad vote, but I voted for somebody because I thought they were cool. I was 18, I guess. I just turned 18, I think. At some point, that very first time I voted for president, and I didn't know the issues. I didn't know where I stood on things. But he seemed like a cool guy, and yeah, he wasn't the worst president in the world looking back, but that's not the right reason. You have to be informed. And so here's what I suggest. First of all, going back to where we started with the preaching politics thing, okay? What are the issues that the politicians are talking about that are God issues, okay? Because if you line up with the heart of God, then you're not going to be wrong, right? If you uncover that, if you discover that, okay, so, I don't know, politicians are talking about the environment, okay? Well, let me dig into the Bible and see what God has to say about the environment, right? And if God cares about the environment, then I'm going to care about the environment. Now, compared to everything else that God cares about, The environment might not be as important as something else, but those are the kinds of things that you need to start digging into and discovering. Not so much what the politicians say or think about anything up front, but what does God say and think about things up front. Start there. And as you do, as you uncover the heart of God, then you will line up, your heart will line up with his heart, and you can decide from there those issues that are God issues that are the most important to you. I shared, one of the most important ones with me, for me earlier. It's a God issue that has been politicized, and so I start there. Then, once you've got that strong foundation, because it comes from Scripture, it comes from God, then you can look at these things that maybe don't seem to be God issues so much, and where do you stand on those? And unfortunately, finding the truth within a political party or within a political candidate, it's not easy, because again, they're trying to get elected. They want their agendas out there, and they need all the votes, right? They need votes from everybody. So they try to, okay, well, where can I get the most votes? I'm going to focus on what those people want, and I'm going to go that direction. And there's not a whole lot of votes to be had over here. I'm going to ignore them completely, or somewhere in the middle. And so they cater to those things because they're trying to get the votes. And so what you really have to do is, once you've decided on the God issues and you've got them prioritized for you as an individual, look at those other ones that may be gray areas, or just you're convinced that God doesn't care anything about that, but these guys are making a big deal, whatever, and kind of get a feel for where you stand on those, and do your research. You've got to do your research. You can't trust the politicians. You can't trust most of the media. You've really, we've got the internet, and even unfortunately some of the tech companies and search results and things like that, and finding videos of people with different opinions on different things. It's not always easy, but you've got to take the time because it's important, and figure out exactly where this person stands. Now, if the person's been in politics for a while, you've got the benefit of being able to look at their record, because again, that's another thing. The term flip-flop, they do it all the time. They change their opinion, they change their mind, and sometimes it's legitimate. Sometimes it's like, hey, when I was, in my, late 30s, this is what I thought, but since then I've learned more, and so I've changed my opinion on this. And sometimes that's a thing. Sometimes it's like, okay, you have been voting this particular way on issues. You've been saying these particular things for years, and just within the last, political cycle, you've completely changed your tune. So what do you believe about that? So you got to look at that history. If it's available. Some people come onto the political scene and they don't have any history when it comes to politics, but even then you can get online and research the person, find out what have they been doing. If it's a business person, for example, what have they done, and how have they changed, and what have they said? Have they been interviewed on TV? Because let's face it, most of these people that are going to be viable candidates, possibly get elected, they're going to have money. They're going to likely have been in some sort of limelight, spotlight, whatever, at some point, interviewed by somebody somewhere, or there's going to be some sort of record of the things that they've done and the things that they've said and the things, that they've been a part of. What did they give to? Do they give to God's kingdom at all? You might be able to find that out. Or are they giving to causes that you're like, well, that's not in line with what I believe? Okay? So again, once you've done all this research, and I know it's time consuming, I know it's hard, it should not be the way of things. You should be able to just trust what a person says. But because it's a person and not God, you can't, okay? At least not completely, right? Whether they flat out lie, or they exaggerate, which is still a lie, or maybe, they just get passionate and they just get excited, and then they want to promise the moon because they want the moon for you. But as we all know, only Gru has ever stolen the moon. That's a Despicable Me reference. I don't expect you to get it, but you've got to do that research, and you've got to dig beyond the surface, beyond what you see in the debates, beyond what you hear on the mainstream media, and then you'll be able to find them. And the most important thing about that is you can't check out. This is the country in which you live. This is your privilege. This is your responsibility to be a part of this. I talk to so many people that I know very, very close to, people that I love, and they just don't want to, they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to talk about it. And I get it. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. Listening to people say mean things about each other is exhausting. And I mean, even some of the funny things they say, it's like, okay, it's getting old. You're making fun of your opponent or whatever. It was funny the first time. But a lot of it's just mean. It's inflammatory. It gets people worked up. And it's supposed to. That's the point. That's why they do it. They're trying to get you to get passionate about things and get you to vote with your emotions. But you can't vote with your emotions. You got to vote with your head. It doesn't matter if you like somebody. What matters is what they're going to do for you, for your country, for your community, right? The person can be a complete jerk and still do a great job, or the person can be super, super sweet and have no idea how to run a country. That's a real thing. And so checking out is just wrong, in my opinion. You've got to engage. You've got to be a part of it, or you're going to lose the things that you value, or things are going to get worse, or whatever, and you won't have anybody to blame but yourself. But, here's the good part. Here's the good news in all this. It's worth it. It's worth it if you live in a country where you can be a part of this. And so once you've done the research, you've still got 2 more things that you have to do. Before you cast your vote, before you get involved and put a sign in your yard or buy the t-shirt or whatever, okay? Before you attend the meetings and the town halls and the rallies and all these things, once you have figured out to the best of your ability the party or the candidate that you are going to support, that you are going to engage in, pray. Pray, pray, pray. You have to, throughout the process, you've got to keep God involved in this. Okay? Because it's God's wisdom, not the wisdom of the world, that is going to guide you into making the best possible decision. You may have 2 terrible decisions or choices, 2 terrible candidates that you just, and I actually did this when, the waste of vote perhaps, but I chose to make a statement. And in the U.S., you can write in a candidate, even if they didn't win those primary things and they're not the main part. You can write in whoever you want. And I've heard of people writing in Mickey Mouse and all sorts of things. I wrote in Jesus. One presidential election, I'm like, I want my king to be my king. I want my king to be my president. And did Jesus win? Well, he won in my heart. He didn't. He's sitting on the throne, but he's not sitting in the White House, unfortunately. So, he will, by his Spirit, guide you if you let him. And so pray about these things. He'll also bring you peace so that you're not getting so worked up when somebody has an opposing view or there's a candidate you don't like their personality for whatever reason. Either they're a jerk or they're clueless or they're whatever. Because that's part of the problem I see in our country, my country, and a lot of countries, is people get mad. It's like, why can't we have, somewhat intelligent conversations and agree to disagree? And praying and inviting God into this will spare you from a lot of that aggravation and frustration. And your candidate might still not win. It's possible. But the Lord will guide you. And then lastly, the thing you got to do is trust Him. Trust Him. The Bible is clear that about government and people in places of authority, that position, that structure is a godly thing. Now, it doesn't mean that the people that are doing the leading and the people that are in the positions of authority are godly people. but the concept is godly. God's about authority. He's about discipline. He's about structure. He's not a chaotic God, right? He made beautiful things out of the chaos, right? And so if you trust him, even if your candidate doesn't get elected, you'll hear every political cycle, at least in this country, probably around the world, that this is the most important election in history. Every time they say that. Every time. And at what point is it true? I don't know. But every time it is important. And every time, if you pray, if you trust God, if you do your very best to be involved and make good decisions, he'll get you back. And yeah, things may be going down the toilet in your country. They generally are around the world. And this is biblical. There is a direction that the world will head in order for Jesus to return. And so what are we doing? Why even bother getting involved in this? Well, I'd like for things to be good as long as possible. I'd like for things to be as good as possible for as long as possible before we have to go there. At the same time, I'm ready for Jesus to come back today. But until he does, we still live in this world. We still have a part to play. We still have a voice in most countries, some countries, hopefully in your country. And you need to make your voice heard. Not just to make noise, as a lot of people do. Nonsense, yelling, protesting, not even knowing why you're there. But make your voice heard intelligently, calmly, peacefully. Know what you're talking about. Know what you believe. Know what God wants for you and for your nation. And be a part of the solution. And that's all I have to say. I hope this helped. Consider for a moment liking and sharing this video. I'm not trying to be a YouTube sensation or a YouTube star. I just want to help people. And so, again, this is not my typical type of message, not my typical type of video. I don't normally talk about politics at all. But, again, with the elections coming up right around the corner, I thought this might benefit somebody somewhere, and I hope that you'll share it and that you were blessed by it. So, again, do the thumbs up for me, help me out there, and I will have much more content coming as I continue to prepare to re-ramp up the ministry and kind of get things going on a more regular basis. So hope to see you soon. Have a great rest of your day, and please be blessed.